Thanksgiving always brought a kind of noisy warmth into my parents' house, the kind that made the windows fog and the walls feel too close. But this year, the noise sounded different, like it didn't belong to me. I took my usual seat at the long dining table, a place that had never really felt like mine. My mother, Diane, sat at the head of the table, already in performance mode, smiling too wide and talking too loudly. My older sister, Marissa, 3 years ahead of me and somehow always 3 steps above me in everyone's eyes, sat beside her, glowing in that familiar spotlight she hadn't earned but effortlessly inherited. I tried to focus on my plate, on breathing evenly, on ignoring the quiet sting I'd grown up swallowing. But then Diane looked straight at me with a tone that sliced right through the chatter. "So, why didn't you bother showing up to your sister's baby celebration?" she asked, loud enough to hush half the table. A few forks froze midair. Marissa tilted her head, smirking like she was watching a show she'd seen 1,000 times. Heat climbed my neck, but I didn't flinch. I laid my napkin down slowly, deliberately. "I had one too," I said. "My own baby celebration. And you were invited." The room stilled. Even the clinking of dishes seemed to pause. But this wasn't the beginning of the story. The beginning had started months ago, before this dinner, before this confrontation, with something so simple I didn't even question it at first. My name is Riley. I'm 31, living in a small apartment a couple states away, working as a freelance designer. 6 months pregnant. Doing everything alone, but not because I wanted to, because I'd learned not to expect anything else. When I first shared my pregnancy news, the reactions were lukewarm smiles and empty pleasantries. My mother congratulated me but pivoted instantly back to Marissa, who was also expecting. Marissa's bump was smaller than mine, but she posed like she was doing a maternity photo shoot every time someone even mentioned the word baby. My father, quiet as always, said he was happy for me, but only after checking my mother's face for approval. Still, I wanted to believe things might change. So, I planned my baby gathering with care, designing my own invitations, triple-checking addresses, imagining, just once, my family showing up for me without being prompted. I could never have guessed the truth behind what happened next, or who made sure those invitations never reached anyone. Before we continue the story, please tell me in the comments what your name is and where you are listening from, and please like the video and subscribe to the channel for such amazing content. But the morning after my lonely celebration, I checked the delivery logs again, and what I discovered on those tracking pages changed everything I thought I knew about my sister and my family. The baby gathering I planned for myself had been simple, warm, and intentionally small, not glamorous like the ones Mom always arranged for Marissa. I spent weeks choosing soft colors, designing minimalist invitations, and tying each envelope with rustic twine. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt like me. It felt like hope. The morning of the event, my apartment smelled like vanilla and citrus cleaner. Soft music played from a tiny Bluetooth speaker. My best friend, Lila, arrived early with a tray of cupcakes she decorated herself. She tried to hide the concern in her eyes, but I saw it anyway. "Your mom's definitely coming," she said gently. "Your sister too. They probably just haven't texted yet." I nodded, pretending I believed her. I kept glancing at the door every time the elevator chimed in the hallway. I told myself they were stuck in traffic, or running late, or maybe trying to surprise me. Anything but the truth that was already starting to take shape in my chest. By noon, a few friends had arrived, filling the space with polite laughter. I smiled, thanked them, opened their gifts, and posed for pictures, but part of me kept watching that door like it owed me something. Another hour passed. Then another. When the gathering wound down, the empty chairs felt louder than the guests who had come. And when everyone finally left, I stood in the quiet aftermath and tried to decide whether to cry or clean. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from Marissa. "Next time, plan sooner." No emoji. No apology. Just a quick, careless jab. It didn't make sense. Not even for her. My chest tightened. I opened the baby registry, untouched. Then the family group chat, silent. Not a single call, text, or missed notification. Nothing. That's when I remembered the tracking numbers. My heartbeat quickened as I pulled up the receipts on my laptop. My fingers trembled, not with fear, but with a slow-burning anger I'd spent years keeping under control. Each invitation showed the same status, delivered. At first I thought, okay, so they're lying. But then I noticed something I had somehow missed earlier. A signature. Every single invitation had been signed for. I clicked the first tracking file, and a PDF opened. A signature appeared on the screen, familiar in a way that made my vision blur. That swooping first initial. That dramatic curl at the end. That confident pressure on the downstroke. I had seen it my entire childhood. On notebooks. On chore charts. On birthday cards she signed for the whole family. Marissa. My sister signed for the invitations. All of them. My breath caught. I opened the second signature file. Then the third. Then the 10th. Every single signature. Hers. And with every new page, a part of me cracked open, not with shock, but with recognition. This wasn't new. This was who she had always been. But uncovering her forged signatures was only the beginning, because when I dug deeper into the delivery logs, I found something far more deliberate, and far more cruel. I stared at the signatures for a long moment, frozen in the middle of my living room. My apartment was still decorated from the gathering, fairy lights dimming, half-eaten desserts on the counter, little paper confetti hearts scattered across the floor like they were mocking me. It should have been a beautiful memory. Instead, it felt like a crime scene. My laptop screen glowed, illuminating each PDF thumbnail lined up in a row, 12 files, 12 signatures, 12 confirmations that my sister had intercepted every invitation I sent. Not by accident. Not by coincidence. But intentionally, methodically, and with a level of pettiness that reached new levels even for her. I couldn't bring myself to open the remaining files yet. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside, the crisp evening air biting my cheeks awake. I walked to a small diner around the corner, the kind with peeling linoleum and a neon sign that flickered like it was on its last breath. I ordered fries I didn't want and sat there staring at the formica table, letting the hum of the ventilation fan fill the space in my head. Finally, I opened the rest of the files. Each new signature only confirmed what I already knew. She hadn't stopped at one envelope. She had signed for every single one. 12 invitations, all rerouted to the lobby of her apartment building. All signed by the same dramatic swirl she'd perfected over the years. She didn't just want to overshadow me, she wanted to erase me. When I returned home, the weight inside my chest was different. Not heavy. Focused. I opened the shipment logs again, scrolling deeper than I had the first time. That's when I noticed something new, the timestamps. Every invitation was delivered within the same 30-minute window. One after another. A clear pattern. She had waited for the delivery driver. She had known they were coming. She had planned for it. My skin prickled. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't sibling rivalry. This was sabotage, carefully executed. Memories started resurfacing in fragments. The birthday card I mailed my mom last year, she swore she never received it. The package I sent for Father's Day, lost, apparently. A holiday letter I wrote, no response. I had blamed the mail. I had blamed luck. I had blamed myself. But now I saw it clearly. Those losses weren't random. They were intercepted. I printed everything, the signatures, the logs, the timestamps, letting the printer spit out damning evidence until I had a stack thick enough to make the truth tangible. I placed the pages inside a plain folder. No labels. No embellishment. Just the facts. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of tea I didn't drink, staring at that folder. Thanksgiving was in a week. For once, I wasn't dreading it. I was preparing. But when Thanksgiving finally arrived and I walked into my parents' home with that folder under my arm, I had no idea the confrontation waiting for me would expose more than Marissa's lies. It would unravel years of buried truths our family never wanted to face. Thanksgiving arrived with its usual orchestra of noises, relatives laughing too loudly, pots clattering in the kitchen, the smell of roasted turkey drifting through the hallways. But as I stepped into my parents' house with the folder tucked under my arm, everything felt sharper, clearer, almost electrified. It wasn't nerves. It was certainty. My mother, Diane, spotted me first. She gave me the same polite smile she'd used my entire life, the one that looked warm enough from a distance but never reached her eyes. "There you are," she said, smoothing her sweater as if preparing for company. "We were wondering when you'd show." Marissa sat beside her, glowing in that effortless spotlight she seemed to inhale. One hand rested on her belly in a dramatic pose, as if she were shooting a maternity commercial instead of sitting at a family dinner. She glanced at me with a smirk tucked neatly at the corners of her mouth, as though she already knew she held the upper hand. She didn't. Not this time. I took my seat across from them, the chair leg scraping softly against the hardwood floor. The folder remained under my chair, close enough to reach when the moment was right. I didn't plan to start anything, but I wasn't going to let another lie go unchecked. Dinner began with the usual surface-level chatter. Relatives made small talk, Diane bragged about Marissa's nursery decor, and my father mumbled his quiet responses, avoiding conflict like it was a sport he trained for. Then, like she'd been waiting for the perfect opening, my mother leaned back in her chair, raised her voice ever so slightly, and said, "So, Riley, why did you skip your sister's baby celebration?" The conversation froze. Forks paused midair. A few heads turned. There it was. The accusation she thought would silence me. I placed my napkin down slowly, the way someone does when they're done pretending. "I didn't skip anything," I said calmly. "I had my own celebration. And you were invited." The room shifted instantly. Confusion. Shock. A few gasps. My father blinked like he missed the first half of the conversation. "We never got any invitations," he said carefully. And that was my cue. I reached under my chair, pulled out the folder, and set it on the table. The soft thud it made echoed louder than any shout could have. "I know," I replied. "That's why I brought these." Eyes widened. Conversation stopped altogether. Marissa stiffened in her seat, arms crossing defensively. "Riley, what are you doing?" "Showing the truth," I said simply. I opened the folder, revealing the first set of papers, the delivery logs. Line after line showing delivered, delivered, delivered to her building. My mother leaned in, reading. Her face tightened as she scanned each line, the denial she depended on slipping out of her grasp. Marissa scoffed. "That proves nothing." "It does," I said softly. "And so does this." I slid the signature sheets across the table. One by one, every signature stared up at them. The same loops. The same swirl. The same handwriting. Marissa's handwriting. Her face went pale. But exposing her signatures was only the spark, because what happened next shattered the carefully constructed roles in our family, and forced everyone at that table to choose whose truth they believed. The room didn't just go silent, it collapsed into silence. A heavy, stunned kind of stillness that made every breath feel too loud. My mother's fingers trembled as she held the top sheet, her eyes darting from the delivery timestamps to the address highlighted on each page. My father leaned forward, squinting like he expected the words to rearrange themselves into something easier to digest. "These, all went to Marissa's building," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. A cousin at the far end of the table whispered, "Oh my God," under their breath. Marissa's chair screeched across the floor as she jerked back. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her voice thinner than usual. "Anyone could have signed those." It was almost laughable, almost. "Sure," I said quietly. "But they didn't." I slid the second signature page toward her. Then the third. Then the fourth. 12 total. 12 matching signatures. 12 undeniable truths. My mother stared at her. Marissa, why would you do this? Her voice cracked, a sound I hadn't heard from her in years, maybe ever. Marissa's face flushed red, then drained, then flushed again. You're all seriously falling for this? She snapped. She's always doing stuff like this, twisting things to make herself look like a victim. I inhaled sharply, steady, not rising to the bait. You intercepted every invitation I sent. You kept our family from coming. You made sure I celebrated alone. My father ran a hand through his hair, his voice shaking. Marissa, did you really sign these? She glared at him as if he had betrayed her. I'm pregnant, she cried suddenly, as though that single fact could serve as an explanation, or an escape. And I'm stressed, okay? I don't need this right now. Pregnancy wasn't a shield. Not for sabotage. Not for cruelty. You had no reason, I said. No reason except you didn't want my celebration to matter. She shot to her feet. You don't get it. You've always made everything about yourself. The irony almost knocked the breath out of me. Really? I asked quietly. Because you've spent a lifetime making sure no one saw me at all. Her jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought she might try to argue again, but the room wasn't on her side anymore. I could feel it. The shift. The clarity. The recognition. My mother set the papers down, her voice trembling. Marissa, how could you do that to your own sister? Marissa's eyes darted around the room, realizing no one was defending her this time. No quick excuses. No automatic sympathy. Just truth. Raw and exposed. She grabbed her purse, muttering shakily. I'm done. I don't have to sit here and be attacked. And then she stormed out, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the edge of her chair for balance as she pushed past the stunned relatives. The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. But the real shock wasn't Marissa fleeing, it was what happened after she left, when the person I least expected finally broke years of silence to speak up. The door had barely stopped vibrating from Marissa's dramatic exit when the room finally exhaled. Conversations didn't resume, no one reached for their forks. The whole table felt suspended in a moment everyone had sensed for years but never dared to confront. My mother stared at the space where Marissa had stood, her face pale, stunned, almost hollow. She had built her identity around being the parent who understood her eldest daughter, who defended her, who excused her. Watching that belief crumble in real time felt unreal, even for me. My father was the first to move. Slowly, quietly, like someone waking from a long sleep. He came around the table and stopped beside me. For a man who had avoided conflict his entire life, it took everything he had just to meet my eyes. Riley, his voice was low, raw, honest in a way I hadn't heard since I was a kid. I should have seen it. I should have asked questions. I should have. You didn't know, I said gently. He shook his head. No. I didn't want to know. That's worse. He wasn't wrong. Avoidance had been his form of survival, but it had come at my expense. And yet, hearing him finally acknowledge it loosened something inside me that had been wound tight for decades. My mother didn't speak. She just stared at the signatures again, her thumb trembling as it traced the identical loops. She looked smaller somehow, like a truth she'd spent years ignoring had finally cornered her. Around the table, relatives shifted in their seats. Some nodded at me subtly, tiny gestures, but each one felt like a stitch closing an old wound. Others looked shocked, embarrassed even, as though realizing they'd watched me fade into the background for years without ever questioning why. I gathered the papers quietly, slipping them back into the folder. I didn't need validation. I didn't need applause. This wasn't about proving anything anymore, it was about letting the truth finally breathe. I'm heading home, I said, standing slowly. My father nodded, relief and regret tangled together in his expression. "If you need anything," he said softly, "I'm here." I mean it this time. I believed him. I walked toward the door. The house felt different now, not lighter, not heavier, just honest. The kind of honesty that only arrives after something breaks. Outside, the cold air wrapped around me, crisp and grounding. For the first time in years, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like clarity. And as I reached my car, I realized the truth. Families don't fall apart in a single moment. They reveal the cracks that were already there. But what I didn't expect was what happened the very next day, when someone from my family reached out with a confession that changed how I viewed our past, and shattered the last piece of the story I thought I understood. The morning after Thanksgiving arrived with a strange stillness, the kind that lingers after storms, when the air feels too clean and the world seems to lean in, waiting. I woke up with the folder still on my kitchen table, the papers inside slightly bent from being handled so many times. Nothing in them surprised me anymore. The shock had passed. All that remained was a quiet, steady acceptance. I made myself tea, sat down, and let the steam warm my face. For a moment, I thought maybe that chapter was closed, painful, yes, but finished. I didn't expect anyone from my family to reach out. Not after last night. Not after what had been exposed. So when my phone buzzed, I didn't even check it right away. But then it buzzed again. And again. Finally, I picked it up. It was my aunt, the one who'd always seemed neutral, floating between conversations like a guest in her own family. "Call me," her message said. I hesitated before dialing, unsure whether I was ready for another round of apologies or explanations. But when she answered, her voice didn't sound like the voice of someone calling to gossip or demand peace. It sounded weighed down. Serious. Like she'd been holding something in for too long. "Riley," she said softly, "I owe you the truth." My chest tightened. About what? There was a long exhale on the other end, the kind people take when they're about to undo years of silence. "This wasn't the first time," she said. "Not even close." I felt my throat close, but I didn't interrupt. "I saw things," she continued. "Over the years. Birthday cards, small gifts, envelopes you mailed to the house. I didn't know where they ended up. But I knew they never made it to your parents." My grip tightened around the phone. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," she said quickly, "but because you deserve to know it wasn't your imagination. You weren't forgotten. You were blocked." The word hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. "Blocked." She went on. "Your sister used to check the mail religiously when she still lived at home. She'd get there before anyone else. Once, I saw her stuffing something into her purse. She laughed it off, said it was junk mail. But it wasn't." A chill rolled over my skin. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked quietly. Her voice cracked. "Because your mother always believed Marissa. And I didn't want to be the one to light the match." But the match had already been lit. Years ago. And I had spent my entire life breathing in the smoke. When we ended the call, I sat there with the phone in my lap, the truth settling into the spaces I'd never been able to fill. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was decades of small, sharp cuts that I'd mistaken for accidents. It wasn't just the invitations. It was everything. But nothing prepared me for the moment, just a few hours later, when someone completely unexpected showed up at my door, carrying something that proved the past was far more tangled than I ever imagined. That afternoon, I was tidying up the leftover decorations from my baby gathering, gently taking down the string lights, packing away the unused favors, wiping down the quiet remnants of a celebration that should have felt fuller. I moved slowly, not out of sadness, but out of reflection. The truth from my aunt's call still sat in my chest like a stone that finally had a name. So when there was a knock at my door, it startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Lila had already checked in. My father never dropped by unannounced. My mother, well, she wouldn't come without calling first, rehearsing her tone in advance. When I opened the door, I froze. Standing there was my cousin, someone who had barely spoken at Thanksgiving, someone who normally blended into the family background as quietly as I once did. His hands were tucked into his coat pockets, his shoulders tense, as though he'd been standing there for a while, working up the courage to knock. "Hey," he said softly. "Can I come in for a minute?" I stepped aside, confused but not alarmed. He walked in, glancing around, taking in the leftover decorations with a heaviness I didn't understand yet. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small stack of envelopes. These belong to you." My breath caught. The envelopes were unopened. Their cream-colored cardstock looked perfectly preserved. My handwriting was unmistakable. "I found these," he said quietly, placing them on the table. "In Marissa's old room at your parents' house." My fingers lightly touched the stack, trembling. There were more than I expected: birthday cards, holiday letters, even a couple of small padded mailers I'd forgotten I'd sent years ago. "She hid them." His voice cracked. "All of them." The room tilted slightly. Even though a part of me had suspected it, seeing the evidence physically, in my hands, made everything real in a way the printed signatures never could. "Why are you giving me these?" I whispered. He swallowed hard. "Because last night, watching everything unfold, I realized I should have said something years ago. I knew she was doing things. Small things at first. But I thought it wasn't my place." He rubbed his forehead, guilt etched across his face. "I'm sorry, Riley. You didn't deserve any of it." For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel dramatic. I didn't feel crazy. I felt seen. I gathered the envelopes gently, like fragile proof of a version of myself that had tried so hard to be heard. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it fully. His honesty stitched together something that had been torn long before adulthood. Before he left, he paused at the doorway. "You know," he said quietly, "you're going to be a great mom. And your kid, they're going to grow up knowing what real love looks like." After he walked away, I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing in deeply. The past had left its marks, yes. But it no longer controlled the narrative. The truth had finally surfaced. And I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. I looked at my small apartment, at the lights, the decorations, the quiet warmth I had created for myself and my child, and realized something powerful. I hadn't needed their approval to build a life worth celebrating. And I never would. For the first time, the future felt like mine. Completely, undeniably mine.